So initially, I thought the arrest should have never occurred. The court record indicates that he was 10 feet away. Is that in your face?
It's a good question. It's a good question. How close is too close?
So first of all, I want to say that, my views are just mine. I do teach a lot of agencies here.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Scott Coffey. We are here on our Nevada Judges, and I am your host. We've got an interesting topic today. We're going to be talking about the First Amendment, what happens when it runs into the police's ability to do their job on the scene, and we're going to be talking about Jose DeCastro, who is currently serving 6 months for obstruction and resisting in what started as a filming incident at a traffic stop. He calls himself a constitutional law scholar and says that he is providing a public service by documenting police activity, and things kind of escalated. We're going to talk about that case, and I am happy to have two guests with me today. We've got Lisa
Szyc.
Yes. I didn't want to mispronounce that. And Anthony
Bandiero.
Mr. Bandiero does training for Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department.
All the agencies here. I teach pretty much every agency.
Yeah, has for years. And Ms. Szyc is a criminal defense attorney.
Yep.
As am I, but we promise we're not going to tag team Mr. Bandiero on this. We're going to have a open discussion.
Yeah.
So, Mr. DeCastro, you've had the opportunity to watch the trial and the video, both of you. What were your initial impressions?
So initially, I thought the arrest should have never occurred. I think that he was not obstructing. And I think it will be interesting to see what Judge Levitt does with it on appeal. I think that he has created some interesting issues with his courtroom antics and post-conviction behavior, but his behavior on the day, at the time, the filming at the traffic stop, I don't think it rises to the level of obstruction.
What's an officer to do, though, when they've got somebody who is in their face and confrontational? And we can agree, Mr. DeCastro seemed to be somewhat confrontational, right? Go back and do your job, little doggy.
Sure.
Those kind of comments.
But first I want to address the comment in your face. Is 10 feet really in your face? The court record indicates that he was 10 feet away. Is that in your face?
It's a good question. How close is too close?
So first of all, I want to say that, my views are just mine. I do teach a lot of agencies here, and this issue is still being litigated, and one of my clients is involved in this case. But I will say this, is that this is a tough situation. I mean, these police officers are tasked with a very tough job, and, officer safety is a legitimate safety concern, but we also don't want to, hyperbole, right? We don't want to think that everybody is out there to kill us. That's not a good mindset either. That's actually a very unhealthy mindset. How close is too much? I will say at the end of the day, what I teach my officers is that when it comes to obstruction is that you basically cannot effectively do your job. And I compare that with efficiently, right? A lot of these First Amendment auditors will do things where it causes you cannot efficiently do your job. You have to, talk a little louder. You have to, maybe, take your attention away and maybe address them for a little bit. That's not so efficient, but it's also maybe not illegal. I'm not saying we haven't really got to the brass tacks of what Jose's done in this case, but I'm just saying that's generally speaking, how close is too close? The officer, what I teach and my principles is that the officer cannot effectively do their job.
And you say First Amendment auditor. What is a First Amendment auditor? This is a newer term. I mean, I've done this job for 30 years.
Yeah.
This is the first time I've heard that. Maybe I need to be more in tune with social media.
So interestingly, in preparation for us to have this discussion, did a quick little, search on Google to see, because there are lots of definitions for that phrase, because it is a relatively new phrase. And there are two prevalent internet definitions for what is being defined as a First Amendment auditor. One is exactly the behavior that Mr. DeCastro is engaging in, those that pull out their phones and record police activity. And another is people who pull out their phones and record activity in any public space. So it goes beyond that of just police activity. But if I walk into a commercial business and I pull out my phone and start recording interactions between a patron and a customer, if the employee at that business calls the police on me, they have failed essentially that First Amendment audit, because the argument is that you should be able to record any interaction in any public space. And that puts us down a completely different rabbit hole than from today's conversation. But I thought it was an interesting point of view because it kind of ties into, I think, Mr. DeCastro's point of view and where he was at when he was recording the police interaction in the traffic stop.
So is the position of these folks that in public spaces there is no privacy?
Essentially, yes.
Generally.
That's the idea, and particularly with officers. Of course, officers have body cam now too.
So they're recording themselves. But I would also say, just before we go on to that, because I think that there are actually two types of First Amendment auditors. There's the first 1A auditor, if you want to be cool about it, the first 1A auditor is those who just want to record. They just want to see police officers. They're actually hoping for a good outcome. They're hoping that the Constitution is complied with. And then there's the other First Amendment auditor who's like DeCastro, who is really after three things: money, badges, and fame. They don't want to just watch cops succeed. They want to watch cops fail. And the way he acts, what he says, the words he uses, go back to your job, little doggy, whatever,
Right.
I mean, he says all kinds of things. He does not want to see cops succeed. He actually makes it very clear that he is very anti-police. And I just want to be clear that that's something to consider. But generally speaking, it's not illegal to record police officers in a public place doing a public act.
Or to be anti-police.
Or not to be anti-police. Absolutely. He absolutely has the right to be anti-police. Absolutely. And he has the right to say that during his presence.
But in this situation, there's no question he's antagonistic.
Correct.
Right? He doesn't want to back down. He's at another arrest where he was also antagonistic.
Right.
Told an officer, "Shut your mouth. I'm an important guy.
Right.
I'm on YouTube, and you're going to look like a fool. Just shut your mouth and mind your own business if you know what's good for you."
Right.
I mean, he is clearly antagonistic.
And he's good. He's very good at it, by the way. If you watch his videos, he's highly effective. He's sharp when it comes to this antagonism.
Being antagonistic doesn't always rise to the level of being a crime. I mean, in this case, I realize that argument sounds ridiculous because he was arrested and now sentenced for obstruction. But had he been 20 feet back, would we be having this conversation?
I think the key, though, is it's not that he's committing a crime by being antagonistic. I think it's that you have an officer who is allowed to consider his antagonism. He's allowed to consider that this person clearly does not either see me as legitimate authority or whatever, and he's allowed to consider that part of his officer safety issue.
Understood, but in this instance, part of this is whether or not you're stopping an officer from doing his job, right? That's part of the
I think so, yeah.
part of the fundamental definition I would think of obstructing. And in this instance, before DeCastro is ordered to go to the police car, he lets the motorist go.
Right.
His job is done at that point. And the resisting's about the walking to the police car, which DeCastro's doing. He's disgruntled about it, but he is doing it. I'm a little, it seems like we're having it both ways to some extent, if that makes sense.
The only thing I will say about this, and I love your point of view on this, is that at the end of the day, if we believe that a crime has already occurred, that he's already obstructed, which we can debate about that, then he's allowed to now have discretion. So, you know what? I have a bigger fish. You're my small fish. You were just committing a very minor traffic violation. In fact, it was like registration issue. You're out of here. Now I'm going to deal with him.
Sure, but what would the normal everyday obstructing, would it always result in an arrest?
No.
It's discretionary, right? So many years ago, I had a case that was kind of similar to this, where it was a traffic stop and it was a sovereign citizen case, which, again, another rabbit hole, but officer asked my client for a driver's license. He didn't have it because he had a constitutional driver's license, and it led to an obstruction and a resisting charge because my client couldn't produce a driver's license. And so ultimately, as my client was shuffling through these papers trying to find his constitutional driver's license, the officer felt like he wasn't complying with the command fast enough and ultimately pulled my client out of the car, which led to the obstructing and the resisting charge. So in my mind, I don't think there's much of a difference between my client attempting to produce his constitutional driver's license and what Mr. DeCastro was doing in this case. He was standing 10 feet away, yelling obscenities at an officer. By the time he got to the point where he was walking to the car, we have compliance.
Right. So, I mean, it is a very interesting question as to where the ability to film First Amendment rights run against officer safety, officers' ability to do their job. I mean, a cynic here would say DeCastro got arrested for being a jerk, not DeCastro got arrested for anything he physically did. Because there's a real question whether there was any physical obstructing in this particular
There's a legitimate
instance.
question. I think that's something that should be viewed on appeal, right? I think that's not something that they actually really got into at the trial level.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, that's probably a missing ingredient for me, at least. I would like to know that because I would like to talk to you about the Wilson case that's come out recently that may help define whether or not DeCastro is violating the law and so forth, obstruction.
Yeah, and tell us about Wilson a little
So
bit.
real quick, so Wilson, I wish I knew if it came out. I think it actually came out before DeCastro's trial, and I'm almost positive of that, but I can't quote it. But basically, what happened is Wilson is a lady in Carson City. She is observing a police interaction with a suicidal juvenile, and I'm sure it's very tense. According to the case, the kid had a knife to his body. I'm probably thinking throat, right? And he's suicidal. So Carson City SO Sheriff's Office is trying to get him in custody for what they like a civil commitment because he has to go get checked out. Right. And throughout the whole time, Wilson, for whatever reason, is yelling at these police officers. I don't know if she maybe disagrees with their tactics, something about it she doesn't like, but she's targeting the officers. They tell her multiple times to, hey, police, stop yelling at us. We're trying to focus on this poor kid. You're obstructing us. She will not stop her behavior. And at the end of the day, they did get the kid in civil, in custody, civil commitment. They then went to her and said, Wilson, you're going to get a ticket, right? You're going to get arrested, or not arrested, cited for obstruction. And she goes to trial. She loses. And it goes, because she is taking away the officer's focus, right? The officers, in a sense, cannot do their job efficiently when they have somebody like Wilson yelling. We all agree on that. So it goes to the Nevada Court of Appeals, and they say, hey, timeout. That's not really what obstruction is. Just because you have a person engaged in the First Amendment, what was her intent? And if you look at the NRS, what was her intent? Did she willfully try to delay, obstruct, hinder? No, not that you. Well, maybe, but you haven't proven that. All you said was that in the trial court was looking at did it have the effect of delaying their investigation? Yes, but what is her intent? Was that her willful intent, or was she just willfully trying to speak her mind?
Which brings up an interesting question in this case, right? Because DeCastro claims he's doing a public service.
And he definitely believes that.
And that he's a member of the press.
Correct.
Right?
And he is. Legally.
Is
legally.
he?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
100%. Without a doubt.
And I agree with you. Explain why.
Well, because the whole freedom of the press does not, it's clear under case law that the freedom of the press is not just Fox 5. It's every person who's trying to gather information or give information about public affairs, about things that are public interest. And that's what he.
And I watched some commentary on the case, and somebody was complaining that he was claiming to be a member of the press. He said, well, that's ridiculous. But fact of the matter is, he has 500,000 followers. 500,000. That's more than the circulation of the RJ, I guarantee.
Yeah.
Sure.
More than the circulation of a lot of papers.
Yes.
And so there has to be an outlet, I suppose, for those sorts of activities too, even if they're not Walter Cronkite,
And that's the thing.
Eduardo Murrow.
I think my issue is with the use of the word press, because I think he is a sharer of information. I don't think that press to me implies that it is
real, like traditional. Like
I would call him a vlogger. I would call him.
But that's the press, though. You have to give him that. Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
You're not taking the position that the press is necessarily objective now, because I think we've seen a move away from that from
I'm
both
not,
sides.
but
Whichever argument you care to take.
I have.
He's not super legit.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. Like he's not. I would not. Like he's not getting a press pass to go into a news conference.
No.
And what would stop anybody from any private citizen to pull out their phone and say, I'm a member of the press, right?
I think there needs to be a distinction there. Although I don't disagree with you that he has some legitimacy with his 500,000 followers, but I don't know that I could go so far as to call him a member of the press.
Well, he's
Not traditional press. I agree.
He's certainly self-aggrandizing, right?
Sure,
Yeah.
yes.
He certainly pats himself on the back every chance he gets.
He definitely does that with both hands.
And certainly is in the face of authority. But
Sure.
the flip side is, we don't have people that are willing to do that. We don't see the video on George Floyd.
Yeah.
We don't see Rodney King 25
No,
years ago.
he's
They're all
performing a service. I do agree with that.
And it falls under the First
And
Amendment.
he has
And
a
it falls under the First Amendment.
large, I do agree with that.
Yep.
And he has a large audience. So I can agree with all of those things. My issue is just
Yeah, he can go into the White
press.
House.
Yeah.
He can be part of the press corps. I agree with that.
Yeah.
But the flip side of this, though, if setting aside the taping portion and everything else, what does this case say about how to handle yourself or not handle yourself in a courtroom, for example?
Right, okay.
That's a funny one.
So interestingly, I think that actually raises a completely different issue because so judges set the tone for what is appropriate courtroom decorum, right? Like, and we've seen it in many courtrooms besides just Judge Zimmerman's. I myself have seen my own clients be taken away by multiple marshals in which I've had to put my hands up and step away from the table because they have not liked the sentence that has been rendered on them. I have also seen my clients slam on the table and scream obscenities in the middle of trial because witnesses have said testimony that was not true. Client control is real for defense attorneys. I don't have to tell you that. But I think what he did here was just part of the persona that he portrays. Whether he believes it or not, or it is a persona, I don't know. But whatever those were antics. And perhaps for clicks and views and clickbait, it did not help his position in any way.
Well, it certainly got him more punishment.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
But it also drove people to, I mean, I've seen the trial views. There was something like 500,000 trial views. On this. Something
Again,
crazy. So the punishment, he got 6 months.
Max.
She was, in my opinion, Zimmerman punished him for his behavior in the courtroom, not for his citation. Because how many times have you defended an obstruction citation and it has been 30-day suspended sentence, go take an impulse control?
Well, one of the most interesting things to me about this whole trial was Agnes Botello, the prosecutor, asked for a $500 fine and a suspended sentence.
Yeah.
Sure.
But when's the last time you've had a prosecutor come in and ask for a fine, nonviolent offense, and the judge says, you know what, I think I'm going to give you 6 months in custody? That is a rarity, I would imagine. In my 30-year career, I've never had it.
I've seen it happen once. And again, in that moment, that was when my client slammed on the table and started screaming obscenities, where the judge went sideways on my sentence.
Yeah.
But again, my client had behavior that was similar to DeCastro's in the courtroom.
But judges also have other tools to deal with that, right? Contempt of court.
Sure.
But contempt of court's only 25 days.
Yes.
So,
And well, contempt of court is a little bit, you have to consider it has to be a violation of a lawful order. And did she tell him to stop? Did he commit? And because there are two things to consider with contempt of court. One, the egregious behavior has to happen in front of the judge, which in this case it did. And two, there has to be an order. So did she order him to stop and then he did it again, or did he just have an outburst and she got tired of it?
For the viewers, should we actually say what the egregious behavior is? Because I think it's important for our viewers to understand what we're referring to. And I'll say, he basically, the judge said that no phones were allowed to record. There's only one organization allowed to record. I think it was our Nevada judges.
Yes.
What?
And they properly filed a media request.
And so he did not, but she's not stupid. She knows that he's probably surreptitiously recording. I think he was actually, if that's what I heard. Regardless, she wanted the marshal to hold onto his phone, which is appropriate because he is a chronic, surreptitious recorder. And he basically he gave the phone to the marshal and he said something like, "You pig."
Yeah, or little piggy or something.
Yeah, something like that. But, clearly insulting. The marshal did nothing to this guy, just doing his job, commanded by the judge. The judge obviously was not going to accept that.
Yeah, and in my experience, insulting court staff is about the worst thing you can do.
Absolutely.
It's akin with it had he said it to her. But where I have to give Judge Zimmerman credit, when she made her sentencing record, she made a very clear record for the basis for this maximum misdemeanor punishment that I think if you look at it on its face will make it very difficult to overturn this on appeal. Because she appropriately justified it.
His behavior, his chronicness of he also has a pending case.
What she said, it was officer safety, and she was concerned about officer safety. Do you think that's honestly it? I mean,
For the sentence?
That's a tough question. I know what she said on the record.
Sure.
Okay? But I got a pretty good feeling what he's being punished for, and it's not for violating officer safety.
The question is this. I think the question is this. If you had a guy who was within 10 to 15 feet, because I think he backed up a little bit, if you had a person 10 to 15 feet simply doing this and got arrested for obstruction, would he get 6 months in prison? I'm sorry, jail. Probably not.
No. But also, if you had a guy 10 to 15 feet and he was simply doing this, does he even get the citation?
Does he even get contacted? I don't know. I think that I told you the aggression is going to be part of the calculus, right, for the officer, and I think that's fair.
And I think if you have the guy who's 10 feet out and follows the command the first time where the officer says back up and all he does is still stand there and do this, we never have this case, we never have this conversation, and you have a guy who doesn't have 500,000 YouTube viewers, right? Yep. Because this is boring, and this doesn't get clicks.
Anthony, you've done training for
everybody.
Decades.
Yeah, a couple decades, yeah.
Long time.
Yep.
I would imagine the training on how to handle these First Amendment auditors, these sort of things, has changed over the last 20 years.
Not only has the training changed, actually the training it used to be non-existent. It's the officer's mentality has changed. I will tell you that, if you look back 20 years, officers were falling for these First Amendment auditor audits left and right. They were basically being, they're just falling for, literally falling for it because it's a trap. A lot of these guys like DeCastro, they want to see these officers lose their cool.
And engage.
And then when I see officers and I'm not saying here wasn't right. I'm just saying in general, when you do see officers that don't bite the bait, you don't get any views, or you don't see the video at all. But we do see, since about 20 years ago from today, you do see less and less officers actually engaging these people because they actually know that they're being played. Right. That's really.
But that also rises to the level of going back to your hypothetical just a second ago. You have the guy 10 feet, 15 feet. He's standing there, and again, he's screaming the things at the officer, but he's not in any other way obstructing, or he's even 15 or 20 feet back, and he's standing there and still yelling the obscenities. Again, being anti-police is not a crime. Saying things that might hurt your feelings is not a crime. If he's not willfully or intentionally interfering with the officer in the engagement of his lawful duties, we haven't committed a crime.
But I will tell you what I tell my clients time and time again. They will complain about the officer was rough with me or whatever might happen. He doesn't have a right to do this or he doesn't have a right to do that. And I say, next time you get in a beef, you take a copy of the Constitution and you hold it up and you see how well that stops a baton or a boot to your head.
Yeah, because it still hurts when you get hit.
It still hurts when you get hit. And the fact of the matter is, if you are antagonistic, you increase the chances of getting confronted, getting arrested, getting injured exponentially.
And they're human beings. Just like Judge Zimmerman's a human being. If his behavior contributes to his sentence, it is what it is. It's part of being a human being, right? And people do have reactions to this thing. The one thing I'd like to address though is DeCastro was not just filming and being antagonistic, he was also engaging the driver. Does that play any role for you in the officer's contact with him?
Yes, because at that point it adds a level of maybe then he's rising to a level of interfering.
Right.
But did it stop the officer?
Right.
Because was the officer still able to write his citation? Did the officer even write the citation, or did the motorist just drive away? Because to me, if I stand there and yell, and unless what DeCastro was yelling was, you don't have to answer his questions, you don't have to show your registration.
You can drive away.
Yes, unless DeCastro is saying any of those things, which is bad legal advice, he's not obstructing.
Well, the bad legal advice is a whole different issue for this particular person, right? Because he says one of the ways that he makes money is selling legal documents online. Right. You have to wonder the value of those documents.
The unauthorized practice of law?
Yeah, I probably wouldn't buy those documents. But
sure.
Yeah, but there's a market for it, right?
Oh,
that's why he has that many
Well, your
viewers.
sovereign citizen client had a license probably sold by DeCastro.
Yeah.
It was 15 pages of the Constitution. That from Pennsylvania.
I look at it from the officer's point of view, though, right? There's something we said about the officer's in his squad car. He's looking this driver up, and he sees a random person engaging his driver with the phone and so forth. What do you, if that was you, if you were on the receiving end of a DeCastro, wouldn't you want the officer to push this guy back a little bit?
I mean, yes, but for safety reasons of myself. Like, I don't want some random stranger standing at my window. But also, as a criminal defense attorney, my window is only rolled down this much.
Well,
because,
but
like, you don't need to hear anything more than my eyeballs.
Yeah, but you change the facts, change the answer. What happened with,
You're not wrong.
Right? That's true. Like, in this case with the female driver that was here, she rolled down her window completely. She was DeCastro only 5 feet or so away from her, maybe 10. So, right, I mean, there's something to be said about that, where the officer can say, hey, maybe it's not just my safety or my investigation, but it's also her. And he actually did say that in court, that she had a right to privacy. Now, of course, we have to be careful with that, right?
Sure.
I mean, but I know what he means. Obviously he's not a lawyer, but what he means is, hey, I got to protect, he did say something like this, responsible for her, and he is.
Well, he's essentially saying what DeCastro said in the other stop, which is mind your business, right? He got directly in the officer's face, mind your business.
Right, exactly. But it is his business.
It is his business.
That's his detainee. She is seized because of the officer's action, so he's responsible for her.
But she wasn't under arrest, so she's not a detainee.
Well, you know what I mean. She's detained. She's seized under the 14th Amendment.
She's stopped.
Yeah, she's not in custody. But the point is that he is still responsible in many ways for her safety and so forth. Now, I'm not saying.
But there was nothing there at that point that gave rise to the level of that was a threat. Like DeCastro with his phone in his hand isn't rising any alarms that there's an imminent threat.
Other than generically, everybody is to some extent, right? And I would imagine as an officer, you are trained to some extent to say the worst threats are the ones that you don't see.
Yeah, and I do want to be careful though, because if we go down that road, then everybody's a threat. You're a threat right now, and I can put you in handcuffs. I mean, everybody could be. I could be a murderer. It's the point is, anything's possible. It's just not probable. So we want to be kind of careful with that hyperbole and that we call it hypervigilance.
Sure.
And it can cause bad things.
But it's very interesting to me looking at the two different stops. The one that he was convicted for, the other one I think may still be pending.
Yeah.
The officers use different tactics, right?
Mm-hmm.
The officer in the case where he's convicted pushes back pretty hard. Get over here. You're going to do what I say. You're going to do this. The other officers, older, seem more experienced. It was a vehicular death scene.
It was a fatal accident involving, Metro motor officers, and
there he was way out of line, in my opinion.
He was really pushing it.
He was underneath the police tape, back outside the police tape, going into areas that he shouldn't be.
Yeah.
But the officer was much calmer about things.
Yeah.
They didn't listen to his mouthiness, which has got to be hard.
Sure.
And nobody's going to say that's easy, particularly if you're out there by yourself.
Sure.
But it de-escalated in a very different way.
Yeah.
But officers are human.
Yep.
So how much of this is attributable to training? What are officers trained as far as being assertive, that sort of thing?
Well, look, I mean, the DNA of an officer is to be in command, right? I mean, that's from day one in the academy, they are taught to take control of scenes, and that's what you want. You think about October 1st and everything below that. I mean, you can't have an officer who's not assertive and in control. But the other thing is, of course, the part of the training is don't forget the Constitution, right? I mean, it's not a recommendation; it's a mandate, and people have rights. So at the end of the day, make sure your orders are lawful, and that's what we're talking about here. It was the order to back up lawful. Did he back up enough? That's the question that I would love to see what the appellate court, finds, right? But
I can be assertive without being an asshat.
Yeah, sure, I agree. That's what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And I think that's the difference there, because in the situation where he was under the police tape and the fatal, that when death is involved, there is a level of respect I think that's required in any situation, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so at least to me, as a human being, when someone has lost their life, there is a level of respect that I think the situation warrants, no matter the circumstances. And I think the experienced officer in that situation absolutely handled it correctly, in taking every step to de-escalate, minimize, but still I think he was also in command, just without having to raise his voice and show his muscle.
Metro officers are definitely highly trained in de-escalation. Could he have done a better job? I think everybody can do a better job, but overall, I mean, I didn't see something too egregious. He wasn't yelling at the guy. He wasn't threatening him. He was just saying, get back, you're obstructing, and so forth.
How about the grab when he's walking to the car?
So, here's my thing. I think that my viewpoint has always been, even if the order was unlawful, even if he, per the law, looking in retrospect, he was back far enough. My view has always been that when officers, are going to put hands on you, you comply. And first of all, it makes sure that everybody survives the incident, right? because we know that when people resist, even if it's an unlawful arrest, people can get hurt, and usually it's not going to be the cops, right? Cops are the ones, the training, they have the bat belt, they have all the tools. So I think my viewpoint is him resisting and him pulling away, if that's what actually would happen. Again, I wasn't there. The video is not super clear on how much resisting he did. I do not think that was, I think that's unlawful.
Yeah,
that's what I think.
And the officer even said, I didn't think he was trying to
hurt me.
Right. Didn't think it wasn't that kind of situation.
Yeah. Just being non-compliant?
Just non-compliant.
Right.
Keep your hands off me, I'm following your orders.
Right.
And he appeared to be following orders at that point.
Generally, maybe. Not perfectly, but we'll see, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's
And so what's interesting there too is, again, you have to look at the resisting statute, because legitimately, maybe not perfectly, is about as clear as mud. And so I think there you'll see a situation similar to maybe the Wilson situation, because I think we have an issue with how our obstruction and our resisting statutes are written, because they leave a lot of room for interpretation. And when you're actually trying those cases, it becomes a problem because it leaves a lot of room for interpretation.
I was a cop in Nevada, and I used to make a joke, like, obstruction was always the catch-all. Like, if you committed a murder and you weren't sure what type of murder, just hit him with obstruction. We'll figure it out later. That Wilson case, that's one of the reasons I wanted to get on the show, because I really want to say, like, I would love to, for the judge, again, I'm not the judge, right? I'm not that smart. I don't know all the ins and outs of how this, you guys know way more about the criminal law than I do. I'm a civil rights focus. But I would love to look at DeCastro in the lens of Wilson. Physical obstruction and fighting words. Clearly it wasn't fighting words, right? But physical obstruction, they said it requires willful physical obstruction.
Depends on how sensitive you are as to whether or not it's fighting words. I hate to say that, but
there's no way it's fighting words in DeCastro's case.
No.
Right.
No,
Yeah.
it should not be. But the point is, like, they used to talk about victims in law school. You take your victim as you find them, right? The eggshell victim.
Yeah.
And it's the same way with officers. You kind of take your officers as you find them, and you might have somebody at a death scene, an accident investigation, high stakes, who, come on, just get out of our way, mind your own business, go away, treat you very gently. Somebody else at a traffic stop who makes you the primary focus, right? I mean, different officers react in
and suspects
different
act
ways.
everybody's human beings.
Yeah.
But we do want an objective standard. So at the end of the day, I would love to know the court. I can't wait to read the opinion. Whoever's going to, whether it goes to Levitt or it goes beyond to the 3, right? Because the Court of Appeals. I would love to look at this case and say, was this physical obstruction? Because the thing is, what I care about is, I'm not the expert, behind the scenes. I'm not in the court like you folks. What I care about is trying to give my officers guidance about, hey, this was a good case or this is a bad case because of it complied with the Wilson's interpretation of obstruction.
Yeah, and that's got to be hard to train for. I mean,
it is very hard.
Officers, nobody's going to minimize the job that officers have, particularly when confronted by even somebody with good intentions, and you can debate that, I think, with DeCastro, right?
I definitely.
But part of its viewership, in all likelihood.
He has more. Hey, I only have 12,000 subs on my YouTube channel, so he's doing better than me.
I don't even have a YouTube channel, so
Right.
I just learned about them doing the show.
Right. No, I think, and I will tell you this, since you brought it up. I know this officer. I've trained this officer who was in the epicenter of this case. Really good officer, and I think we can agree that he has good faith. Like, he wasn't, as far as he was just trying to do the right thing for his driver, for the violator, and now we're in court, and so far he won. Well, right.
At both scenes, one of the first things that the officers do to de-escalate, including the officer here, is that I don't care if you're filming.
Correct.
You film if you want to, which is. I will tell you a sea change from when I was
it's huge.
When I was younger.
I would agree with that. I think we've come a long way, because again, what you were saying in that where they used to take the bait, the first thing they would put your phone down, turn that off, stop filming, and
correct.
now
Or hit him with wiretapping. In the East Coast, they would hit him with wiretapping violations.
Yeah.
Which is crazy. A felony.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that is just it is very different.
Yep.
There was a talk in the trial about the distance issue.
Yes.
And it's very interesting and very nebulous.
Yeah.
I believe, because DeCastro says 10 feet's what I've seen in these other cases, and that may well be the case.
Sure.
and the officer says, at the academy, we're trained if you're within 21 feet, very specific number,
Yeah.
you're not going to have time to react if somebody rushes you.
Yeah.
Essentially.
Yes. So yes, that's the 21-foot rule has been around for decades, and it comes from the study about people if a person can basically get a knife and attack you within 20 feet. In other words, if they're within 21 feet or less, you're not going to be able to. Your reaction is going to be delayed versus their action. All right? So the problem though is, and look, the officer is at least giving a reason why he's telling to get back. That's great. The problem is, I think we all can agree, there is no 21-foot rule with the First Amendment. There's no 10-foot. And in fact, there could be 2 feet in a nightclub where people are filming and a cop is arresting somebody 2 feet away. You can't necessarily tell the person to get back 21 feet because there is no 21 feet.
Yeah.
What it is, it's totality of circumstances. At least the officer had a reason. He's not an attorney like us, but there is no 21-foot rule when it comes to the First Amendment.
So one of the things DeCastro does is he reaches for a second cell phone. Mm-hmm. And as I'm watching the video for that, I think, boy, he's lucky it's broad daylight and has a reasonable officer and everything else, because when you're in an officer's face,
that's a recipe for disaster.
And you start doing this with your hands.
I got you.
You are.
Yeah, you're yeah. Mm-hmm.
You're asking for problems, and nobody wants to be in that situation. Nobody's saying that officers are, necessarily quick to react. Sometimes they are, obviously, but the point is, for somebody who's this constitutional law scholar that he claims to be, he seems to do a lot of things to create his own problems.
Well, he wants badges, money, and fame, and he's getting at least the fame.
Yeah, and money's an interesting one. We haven't talked about that because there's a civil suit.
Not anymore, to my knowledge.
Did it get dismissed? Did it get summary judgment?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, but there had been at some point.
There had been, yeah. One of many that that's his, maybe that's part of his income, right? Not just with this agency, but around the country. He has the track history around the country. This is his job.
Does anybody know how many 1983 claims he's filed? That'd be
several,
interesting to find out.
But I am actually not aware of any successful ones. So his track record for being successful is, and I could be completely wrong, just with the hearsay.
Okay.
Sure. I don't think he's been very successful.
So at the risk of alienating a few members of our audience, who watches? Who are the 500,000 subscribers to this Deletes Laws channel?
Me? I mean, I'm not a subscriber. I don't want to give him that kind of homage, but the thing is, like, I do watch cops perform because it's a very stressful thing, and in order for me to be a trainer, I have to know what these cops are facing. And I got to tell you, I've done pretty good with first-amendment auditors in my job, but I've seen a lot of officers get baited with these guys because they know what buttons to push. When you're being told, there was one East Coast guy, he's really insulting about people's weights, about cops' weight, females, and so forth. Just really atrocious stuff. I got to tell you, I got to prepare these cops like, you're going to go out there, and when you put that badge on, you are the paid professional. You cannot let these people get to you. And it's hard, but that's just the way it is.
Is this a training opportunity for you to some extent?
Always a training opportunity. Absolutely. I think there's a lot of good things in this video, and there's some questions. I already told you my questions. I want to hear how Wilson pans out with this case. But I think the officer overall did really good. He didn't lose his cool. I love how he told him, you can still film, just look, you got to back up a little bit more. Yeah. And I think he did a good job on the stand. A really good job on the stand, quite frankly.
I think that there is a whole sect of people who are watching because we get all of our information from the internet now and less than legitimate sources. So what frightens me about the 500,000 people who are watching this is that they're looking at this as some kind of legitimate source of information.
Right.
And that terrifies me.
I understand. Do we have any legitimate source of information anymore? I mean, that's it.
Our Nevada judges is the last one.
Right? No, but
right?
That's the existential question here.
The case law that I read that comes down from the Nevada Supreme Court that I cite to in my briefing, that's about it. Because even then, to the extent that I cite to it until it gets overturned.
Yeah. So, if somebody wanted to do what DeCastro is doing or purports to be doing, how should they go about it?
Look, actually, I don't know if this helps, but my mantra here is act like a legitimate news source. In other words, how does the big three, how do they act when they come on scene and they want to view something that's interesting to them? Are they in drivers' faces, right? Are they saying, whatever, right? They're not. They are from afar, not too far, but from afar. They're filming it. They are not antagonizing anybody. That's what I think is a true First Amendment auditor and how they should act. But I also tell the cops this: look at DeCastro, for example, as Fox 5 News. And I know it sounds kind of weird, but legally, and they had some similar authorities. And would you tell Fox 5 News to back up? I probably in this case, Fox 5 News would have been pretty damn close, 10 feet or so, and talking to the driver.
There's that old joke about it. Obscenity is, I know it when I see it.
I know when I see it,
define it, but I know when I see it.
Right.
And it's not that different with the press anymore with social media. I kind of know it when I see it, although I will tell you, this one's kind of on the border for me.
Oh, it's definitely on the border.
I see people on Snapchat doing other things that I wouldn't necessarily call news, but that guy has so many followers. He's got, and he's got an agenda, right?
Yeah.
A known agenda.
Delete laws.
I don't like the police. I want to make sure that they're doing the right thing, whatever it might be. We can disagree with whether or not he knows that.
Sure.
But
well, as much as we have the position here, like, be legitimate, act like one of the big three. Mine, from my kind of defense attorney perspective, is I don't care if you act a fool when you're doing the job, because again, there's nothing illegal about being anti-police. However, if you're going to take that position, if you're going to have that stand, if you're going to walk right up to that line, be prepared for the consequences. And I think what the issue is here with DeCastro, and again, it comes with some of his post-conviction behavior, is he completely was not prepared for the consequences. He acted like someone who could do whatever he wanted, however he wanted with it, and was not prepared to pay the price when he got convicted, right?
Yep.
And I'm specifically now speaking about his post-conviction behavior in the jailhouse calls,
You mean the crying?
and the crying in the courtroom, and asking for leniency, because you've had the conversations with your clients. If you are going to walk right up to the line, walk right up to it. If you're going to give your middle finger to the system, give your middle finger to the system, but give your middle finger to the system all the way. Be committed to that principle, or acknowledge that you have to change your views.
yeah. Well, I suspect there was a talk about him perhaps losing some viewers after this. Some of the subscriptions went down, and I suspect going into court crying probably didn't help him much.
No,
to be quite honest,
his macho image.
No,
right?
Yeah.
But because the cultivated image, I mean, absolutely for this case, I'm the guy that'll stand in their face, right? Geraldo did it 40 years ago.
Yeah, and then you're going to stand and what, cry? No, because listen, again, I'm okay with the behavior. If the behavior had been consistent all the way through, but you turncoated, like the second you become a turncoat, you have now lost any legitimacy that you might have had.
He's probably crying over the food in jail.
And the smell.
Well,
I mean, I can't blame him.
Well, one of the disappointments for me in watching the trial was he wanted to represent himself, and the court wouldn't let him. I think that would have been an interesting circus.
No, 100%.
I don't know that I disagree with Zimmerman for not letting him do that, because I always question the people that want to. I mean, I get that we're allowed to do that under our Constitution.
Yeah, but you got a fool for a client.
Yeah.
No, I'm just thinking for the entertainment value.
There would have been a lot of views, but that's probably why I shouldn't let it happen.
Yeah. Well, with the sentence that she gave him, though, when a judge asks for, or a prosecutor asks for $500 fine, suspended sentence, she hands out 6 months, 3 months on each consecutive.
Sure.
Does she create a martyr?
I don't think so. Again, I get where Agnes got asked for that fine, and that, what was it, the fine and the suspended sentence, because
Correct.
That's typical. That's what we see, right? But also, and it's kind of an unspoken rule, we don't talk about it, you take a case to trial in justice court, you're going to pay a trial tax. It's a thing. It happens. Everybody knows it. You're not supposed to talk about it, but it happens. And you advise your clients on it. And so here, I think there's a little bit of that happening. Usually it's not 3 months, but so I think there's a culmination of trial tax happening. I think there's a culmination of his behavior in the courtroom. I think there's a culmination of his the actual interference with law enforcement. I think, but again, I will give Zimmerman credit, because although she sentenced him to 3 months consecutive on each count, she made a very clear record that will pass appellate mustard.
I suspect that that the amount of time that he got was directly related to his attitude in the court, regardless of what's on the record. I mean, that's just what it looks and smells like.
I don't disagree with you, but if we're going to break it down on the four corners of the page,
Right.
at least I can be comfortable in knowing the four corners of the page are going to pass judicial muster.
Right. But I've got two sons. They are 16 and 18 years old. Hopefully they don't get into trouble, but they're 16 and 18 years old.
And they're boys.
And they're boys, and they are active. And I tell them, you follow commands, you listen to, if you get pulled over, you do what you're told.
Sure.
You go along with the program to some extent. And while I was kind of joking a little bit about self-representation, one of the things that bothered me with this from a defense attorney perspective was the fact that DeCastro was active in the courtroom outside testifying. Okay, so if I have a client has the right to testify. Hopefully they follow my advice. It's their call, right?
Yeah.
But honestly, I'm the one making the call if I'm their attorney most of the time.
Yeah.
That's just the way that it has to work. I know better than they do. Hate to say it, but it's true.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's why you have
and
an
that's why
attorney
they
there.
hire you. And if you're doing your job right, they're listening to your advice.
And there were some arguments that I thought could have got made by DeCastro and by DeCastro's attorney, but DeCastro wanted to interject himself into the discourse. He wanted to say, here's my phone, pig. And, these kind of things, right? I think you hate the police, and he's nodding his head up and down
I remember that. Yep.
Crazy. At some point,
Client
he
control
asked for
became,
forgiveness.
Yeah. I think client control became an effective tool here that worked against him. And I also, again, that loops into the courtroom antics because she's got a bird's eye view. She's watching everything that happens. And you see it when you're sitting up there.
Yeah. Well, looking at the video, did you think the officer was ever in danger?
To some degree, I don't want to get too much into that. I wasn't there. I'll give him the credit. He did articulate there was an officer safety issue, so I have to give him some credit there.
Understood. But there's potentially always an officer safety
Always,
issue.
yeah.
I guess when somebody's raising your voice, it becomes more heightened.
Sure. I mean that's part of aggression, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Interesting.
But the question still is obstruction, right? I still want to know, is that physical obstruction? And we need to know because the officers are dealing with this stuff all the time.
Yeah. And did he prevent the officer from doing his job?
That's the question that I would like to answer by the court.
I don't think that was ever. I don't think that question was ever asked directly. Will you prevent him from doing your job?
No, and it wasn't the Wilson analysis. It was the old school, in my view. It was the old school. Hey, did this affect you? Did this interfere? Did this take away your focus? We know that's not the standard.
I wonder how much of that had to do with counsel fighting with his client versus being able to focus on effectively representing his client.
Correct.
Because you know how difficult it is when you have to divide your attention between controlling what's happening at table versus having an ear listening so that you can pay attention for cross-examination, because there's nothing worse than having an attorney whose attention is divided between your own table and the examination that's happening.
Yeah, no, absolutely true. Well, what else can we add?
I think this is a great conversation. I mean, I think this is this from my perspective. It's an example of what these officers are dealing with every day, and they're making tough decisions. No matter what happens on appeal, I think the officer, in this case, is just doing the best job he knows how to do. I really do. And right now he won at the trial level. Let's see what happens on appeal.
I got to tell you, I'm a little taken aback by the comment that he won at the trial level, because I don't know that the officer's got a vested interest.
Right, it's not the right point of view.
To some extent,
he's just a witness.
Yeah.
Right, he's a neutral witness for the state, but his case was found to be
solid. Yeah,
yeah.
Fair enough. I'd grant that.
Yep.
That's how I interpreted your comment.
Yeah. Well, he just wants, because he's a public, he wants to,
Yeah, we do the same job. We just do it differently.
No.
I do it for the private sector.
No, but it's a good
true.
question.
Yeah.
It's a valid question. And to kind of wrap things up, I think that's a valid, there's a valid debate because there's a weighing here between officers being able to efficiently do their job and somebody being able to watch the watchman, for lack of a better description.
Yep.
And that is a delicate balance.
Yep.
I am team watch the watchman, and I'm even team watch the watchman and scream obscenities. But do it from a distance that's not going to make the watchman arrest you, I guess.
That we can agree on. Absolutely. They can say whatever they want. And we focus on conduct, not content. So that's the question. Was this conduct physically interfering with this officer? There's an argument both ways.
Sure. Yeah. But now I guess to maybe wrap it up is, will we ever agree on the distance per se as to when it doesn't rise to the level of being obstruction?
You can't, because there's no, just like Arizona tried to use that was 8 feet, whatever it was, 8 feet or whatever it was, it's facially unconstitutional. You cannot have a foot rule. You have to have a circumstances rule. I think we all can agree on that.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Yep.
But do we expect too much of officers? To give you the last word here.
100%, we absolutely expect way too much of officers. With everything put on their plate, with all these things that they're asked to do, we absolutely expect too much. Absolutely. And that's a conversation for another day. What has to be removed from the officer's plate? I can assure you there's things that have to be removed from the officer's plate. Absolutely. Yeah. They're asked to do too much.
It's a fascinating conversation. I will be interested to see what happens in district court on the appeal. I know it was in court last week. It's represented by Christopher Worm now, who's a very talented attorney. It will be interesting to see what happens going forward. I don't know that it ends at the district court level. I suspect it may go up past that.
I think so too.
So,
well, thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
We'll keep
Great
in
conversation.
touch. All right. This has been Our Nevada Judges. I've been your host, Scott Coffey. Thank you for joining us.